The only sound in the world was the rhythmic, metallic groan of a steel cable straining against gravity. A single, slender thread of metal, 7/8 of an inch thick, dangling over the abyss. Inside the hollow steel sphere attached to the end of that cable, the air was growing cold, damp, heavy with the smell of recycled oxygen and human sweat. Condensed moisture trickled down the curved walls, pooling on the floor, soaking through the shoes of the two men curled inside. They were folded into a space scarcely 4.5 feet across, knees pressed against chins, shoulders jammed against cold iron, trapped in a fetal crouch that felt less like exploration and more like being buried alive in a tomb of man's own making. The 15th of August, 1934. The Atlantic Ocean, 10 miles off the coast of Nonsuch Island, Bermuda. William Beebe, a naturalist with the curiosity of a child and the nerves of a combat pilot, peered through a window made of fused quartz. Beside him, Otis Barton, the engineer who had designed this steel womb, watched the oxygen gauges with the grim focus of a man who knows exactly how much air is left in the tank. They were dangling 3,028 feet below the surface of the ocean, half a mile down, a depth where sunlight is a distant memory, and the weight of the water above them pressed against the sphere with a force of nearly 1,400 pounds per square inch. Total crushing pressure. If the quartz window developed a hairline fracture, if a single bolt sheared, the water wouldn't just leak in. It would jet through the breach with the velocity of a rifle bullet, liquefying them both before their brains could even register the sound of the glass breaking. They were the first to leave the safety of the sunlit upper world and descend into the eternal night. And what they saw through that 3-inch thick window changed everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. At 500 feet, the red end of the spectrum had vanished, bled out of the water like a wound closing up. The world turned a deep, bruising purple. At 1,000 feet, the purple faded to a grey spectral blue, a color that Beebe described as unlike any other in nature. And then, at 2,000 feet, the blackness took over, not the blackness of a dark room, but a heavy, primordial dark, an absolute absence of photons, a darkness that felt physical, as if the ocean itself was wrapping a velvet shroud around their tiny, fragile bubble. But the dark wasn't empty. That was the horror of it. That was the wonder. As Beebe pressed his face to the cold quartz, he saw sparks, flashes, pale blue constellations drifting through the void. Bioluminescence, life, refusing to be extinguished, creating its own light in a world that had never known the sun. And then, something larger emerged from the gloom. Something that shouldn't have existed. A creature 6 feet long, its body a shimmering lattice of hexagonal scales, trailing glorious, ghostly lights. The Bathysphera intacta, Beebe named it. A phantom. It stared back at him with eyes that had evolved to see in the dark. Eyes that looked upon the metal sphere, not with fear, but with the cold, predatory indifference of a creature that rules the abyss. Beebe saw fangs. He saw mouths that unhinged like cargo doors. He saw stomachs capable of stretching to swallow prey twice the size of the predator. He saw nature's nightmares swimming casually past his window. Up on the surface, the sun was shining. Birds were flying. The wind was blowing through the palms of Bermuda. But down here, 3,000 feet deep, the rules of biology seemed to have been rewritten by a madman. The creatures drifting past the bathysphere didn't look like the fish Beebe knew. They looked like hallucinations. They looked like impossible, grotesque sculptures molded by the crushing hands of the deep. Why? Why the needle teeth? Why the distended jaws? Why the gelatinous, melting bodies? And the eyes, the size of dinner plates. Why does the deep ocean produce monsters? That is the question we are going to answer tonight. We are going to descend much deeper than Beebe and Barton ever dared. We are going to sink past the twilight zone, past the midnight zone, all the way to the crushing silence of the Haddle trenches. We are going to look into the faces of the most terrifying creatures on this planet, the anglerfish, the gulper eel, the barreleye, and we are going to realize something profound. They aren't monsters because they are evil. They are monsters because they are necessary. The deep sea is the most hostile environment on Earth. It is a world of crushing pressure, near freezing temperatures, and eternal darkness. To survive here, life had to abandon the blueprint that works on the surface. It had to twist, stretch, and contort itself into shapes that defy our understanding of what an animal should be. The creepiness of deep-sea life is not an accident. It is a solution. A brilliant, terrifying solution to the problem of existence in a place where existence should be impossible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what your favorite deep-sea creature is, or which one keeps you awake at night. Now, dim the lights if you haven't already. Take a deep breath and let the pressure of your day fade away. Imagine the walls of your room dissolving into cold, black water. Listen for the groan of the steel cable. This is the story of the dark, and we're going to walk through every fathom of it together. To understand the monster, you first have to understand the dungeon. You have to understand the specific, brutal physics that govern the bottom of the world, because the ocean is not just a tank of water. It is a layered, complex, and violent machine. And the deeper you go, the more violent it gets. Think about the air pressing against your skin right now. You don't feel it, but it's there. 14.7 pounds per square inch. We evolved in this pressure. Our bodies are calibrated to push back against it perfectly. But water is heavy. For every 33 feet you descend, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. By the time Beebe and Barton reached their record depth, the ocean was squeezing them with over a ton of force on every square inch of glass. Now imagine an animal living down there. It doesn't have a steel hull to protect it. It doesn't have thick quartz windows. Its tissues, its cells, its very DNA must withstand that crushing weight every second of every day. If you took a fish from the surface, a trout, a bass, a goldfish, and teleported it instantly to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, it wouldn't just die. It would be structurally annihilated. Its swim bladder, the gas-filled sac that helps it float, would implode. Its proteins would warp. Its cellular membranes would solidify like butter in a freezer. So, the first rule of the deep is simple. Get rid of the air. You cannot have gas pockets in a crushing environment. This is why deep-sea creatures often look so strange, so gelatinous, so flabby. They lack the rigid structures and air-filled cavities of surface life. They are built of water, muscle, and jelly materials that don't compress. The blobfish, voted the world's ugliest animal, looks like a melted sad man when you drag it up to the surface. But down at 3,000 feet, it looks like a fish. The pressure holds it together. It is the lack of pressure that destroys it, that turns it into a monster. In its home, it is beautiful. In ours, it is a horror show. But pressure is only the first problem. The second is the dark. Below 1,000 meters, the ocean is pitch black. There is no day. There is no night. There is only the endless, suffocating void. In the surface world, eyes are useful. They help you find food, avoid predators, find a mate. In the deep, eyes are a liability unless you change how they works. Evolution had 2 choices down here. Option 1, give up on sight entirely. Many deep-sea creatures are blind, navigating by scent or vibration, drifting through the dark like ghosts. Option 2, evolve eyes so sensitive, so massive, that they can catch the single photon of light emitted by a distant bacteria. This is why the vampire squid has the largest eyes relative to its body size of any animal on Earth. This is why the barreleye fish has a transparent head, so its tubular eyes can rotate upward to look for silhouettes against the faint glimmer of the surface, miles above. These features look alien to us, Giant, unblinking orbs, transparent skulls. They trigger a primal fear in the human brain, the uncanny valley response that tells us times, this is wrong, this is not natural. Asterisk. But it is natural. It is the only way to see in a world without light. And then there is the hunger. Food is scarce in the deep. Most of the energy in the ocean is up at the top, where the sun feeds the plankton. Down here, you are waiting for scraps, marine snow, bits of dead fish, poop, and rotting organic matter drifting down from above. It's a meager diet. So when you find a meal, you cannot afford to let it go. You cannot afford to be picky. If you encounter another living thing in the dark, you have to eat it, even if it's bigger than you, especially if it's bigger than you. This is the evolutionary pressure that carved the gulper eel, a creature that is essentially a giant mouth attached to a stomach. Its jaws can unhinge to swallow prey larger than itself. This is what sharpened the teeth of the fang-toothed fish. Teeth so long, the animal literally cannot close its own mouth without piercing its brain, so it evolved special pockets in the roof of its skull just to sheath its own fangs. These aren't stylistic choices, they are desperate measures. They are the biological equivalent of a starving man sharpening a knife. The deeper you go, the more desperate the biology becomes. The interactions are stripped of all nuance. It is eat or be eaten in the dark, mate or die alone in the dark. There is no energy for chasing, so predators become ambush hunters. They sit, they wait, they dangle a glowing lure in front of their faces, a bioluminescent lie, and wait for something curious to come close. The anglerfish doesn't hunt, it fishes. It uses the hunger of other animals against them. Beebe and Barton, shivering in their sphere in 1934, saw only a fraction of this. They were dipping their toes into the shallow end of the abyss, but even that glimpse was enough to terrify them, enough to show them that the earth we live on, the green, sunlit, comfortable earth, is just a thin skin, a veneer. Peel it back, dive down, and you find the real planet. A planet of cold, dark water, where monsters are the kings and queens. Tonight, we are going to look at the specific adaptations that make these creatures so unsettling. We are going to examine the physics of the implosion, the chemistry of the bioluminescence, and the brutal logic of deep-sea reproduction. We are going to understand why the deeper you go, the creepier it gets. Because in the end, they aren't the ones who are out of place. We are the soft, fragile things that need air and light and warmth. We are the anomalies. They are the masters of the majority of our planet's habitable volume. They have been down there for hundreds of millions of years, refining their horror, perfecting their strangeness, waiting in the dark. And the first lesson they teach us is simple. You are not afraid of the dark. You are afraid of what is in the dark. And down here, you are right to be. The year is 1930. The location is a few miles off the coast of Nonsuch Island in Bermuda. On the surface, the sun is shining, the waves are a rhythmic, comforting blue, and the air smells of salt and humidity. It is the picture of a tropical paradise. But we aren't staying on the surface. We are leaving the world of air and light behind. We are going to a place where no human being has ever gone alive, and from which very few would return unchanged. Floating on the swell is a barge, the Times, ready asterisk, and swaying above the deck, suspended by a single cable, is a steel ball, the bathysphere. It looks primitive to modern eyes, almost suicidal. A hollow sphere of steel, 4 feet and 9 inches in diameter, with walls 1.5 inches thick. It is barely large enough to hold 2 grown men curled into fetal positions. It has windows made of fused quartz, the only transparent material strong enough to withstand the crushing pressure waiting below. 2 men climb inside. William Beebe, a naturalist with the soul of a poet, and Otis Barton, the engineer who designed this steel womb. They are sealed in. A 400-pound door is lifted into place and bolted shut with heavy sledgehammers. The noise inside is deafening, a ringing clang that signals the end of their connection to the outside world. There is no handle on the inside. Once that door is secured, they are cargo. They are entirely dependent on the crew above to bring them back. The winch engages, the cable tenses, and the sphere slips beneath the waves. We are entering the twilight zone, the mesopelagic. In the first few minutes of the descent, the change is subtle. The water shifts from the sparkling azure of the surface to a deeper, richer blue. But then, physics takes over. Water is a filter. It eats light. The red wavelengths are the first to die, absorbed by the water column within the first 10 meters. Blood, down here, looks black. Then the oranges fade, then the yellows. By the time Beebe and Barton reach 200 feet, the world outside their quartz window is a monochrome cathedral of blue-green. It is a light that feels thick, heavy, a color that doesn't exist anywhere on land. Beebe presses his face to the cold quartz. He is seeing things no biologist has ever seen in their natural habitat. Jellies that pulse with iridescent light, schools of fish that move like a single organism. But they are still in the upper reaches. They are still in the world where the sun has influence. They go deeper. 600 feet. 800 feet. The temperature plummets. The steel walls of the sphere begin to sweat. Condensation dripping onto the men, huddled inside. The pressure outside is building. Hundreds of pounds per square inch, pressing against the steel, searching for a flaw, a crack, a weakness. If the window fails, if the seal breaks, there will be no drowning. There will be no struggle. The water will enter with the force of an explosion. They would be biologically incinerated before their brains could register the sound of the glass breaking. And then, at 1,000 feet, the blue begins to die. This is the boundary. This is the gate. Above is the epipelagic, the sunlit ocean where photosynthesis happens, where life is familiar. Below is the unknown. As the bathysphere descends past 1,500 feet, the last traces of sunlight vanish. The human eye can no longer detect the sun. The ocean outside is black. Absolute, crushing, eternal black. But it isn't empty. This is the revelation that Beebe brought back to a skeptical world. The deep ocean is not a barren void. It is a galaxy. As his eyes adjust to the darkness, Beebe sees sparks, flashes, pinpricks of illumination. He calls them living fireworks. In the absolute darkness of the deep, life has learned to make its own light. Bioluminescence. 90% of the creatures living in this zone can produce light. They use it to hunt, to hide, to communicate, to scream. And the creatures themselves? This is where the creepiness begins to set in. This is where evolution, operating in the dark and under immense pressure, begins to sculpt forms that look like nightmares to the human mind. Consider the face of the deep sea. Why do they look like that? Why the needle teeth? Why the bulging eyes? Why the translucent skin? It comes down to scarcity. The deep ocean is a desert. There are no plants here, no photosynthesis to form the base of the food chain. The only food available is marine snow, the detritus, waste, and dead bodies falling from the productive waters miles above. It is a slow, constant rain of organic decay. To survive here, you cannot afford to be picky. You cannot afford to let a meal escape. And so, the teeth. Beebe describes seeing the viperfish, Chorleodus, Imagine a creature that is mostly mouth. Its jaw is unhinged, capable of opening to 90 degrees. Its teeth are not for chewing, they are for trapping. Long, crystalline needles that curve backward, so long that they don't even fit inside the fish's mouth. When a viperfish closes its jaws, the teeth slide up over its own face, forming a cage. If you are prey and you are caught in that cage, you are not getting out. These animals look terrifying to us, but they are marvels of efficiency. Muscle is expensive to maintain. Bone is heavy. So the creatures of the Twilight Zone have reduced themselves to the essentials. They are often gelatinous, flabby, watery. They lack the dense muscle mass of a tuna or a shark. They don't chase prey for miles. They drift. They wait. They hang in the darkness like suspended animatronics, waiting for something to bump into them. And then there are the eyes. In the Twilight Zone, where the only light is the faint blue remnant of the sun or the flashes of other animals, vision is an arms race. The hatchetfish has eyes that are tubular, looking permanently upward, like binoculars fixed on the surface. They are scanning for silhouettes. They are looking for the faint shadow of prey, blocking the dim light from above. To counter this, evolution has produced one of the most unsettling adaptations in nature. Counter-illumination. The hatchetfish, while hunting with its upward-looking eyes, is also hiding. Its belly is lined with photophores, light-producing organs that match the exact color and intensity of the sunlight filtering down from the surface. If a predator looks up at a hatchetfish from below, they don't see a silhouette. They see nothing. The fish makes itself invisible by shining light. It is a cloak of invisibility made of photons, but other creatures have taken a different path. They have abandoned eyes entirely, or mutated them into something strange. The barrel-eye fish has a transparent head, a cockpit of clear tissue, with green, rotating eyes located inside its own skull, protected from the stinging cells of the jellyfish it steals food from. It looks through its own head to see the world. Beebe and Barton documented these horrors. They sketched them. They described them to a world that thought they were hallucinating. Giant shrimp that vomited clouds of glowing fluid to blind their attackers. Fish with lanterns dangling from their chins. Eels as thin as ribbons that tied themselves in knots. The deeper they went, the stranger it got. At 2,000 feet, the pressure is nearly 900 pounds per square inch. Here, they saw the pallid sailfin, a fish that has never been seen since, a ghost of the bathysphere logs. They saw creatures that seemed to be assembled from the spare parts of other animals. The psychological toll of this environment cannot be overstated. Imagine floating in that steel ball, the cold seeping into your bones, knowing that just inches away is a hostile universe. You look out the window and you see a light in the distance. Is it a potential meal? Is it a mate? Or is it the lure of a predator that is 10 times your size, waiting to inhale you? In the deep, a light is almost never a sign of safety. It is a trap. Beebe and Barton's dives in the 1930s opened the door. They proved that life existed in the abyss, but they were looking through a keyhole. They could only see what swam past their window. They couldn't see the scale of it. They couldn't see the vast, moving architecture of the deep. That discovery would require a war. The 1940s. The world is burning. The Atlantic Ocean is a battlefield. U-boats prowl the depths, hunting convoy ships. Destroyers patrol the surface, hunting the U-boats. And the tool that changes everything is sonar, sound navigation, and ranging. Pinging the depths with pulses of sound and listening for the echo. It was supposed to be simple. Send a ping down. If it hits the bottom, it bounces back. If it hits a submarine, it bounces back sooner. The time delay tells you the distance. But in 1942, aboard the USS Times, Jasper Times, and other naval vessels, sonar operators began to notice something impossible. They would send a ping down into water that they knew, from charts and maps, was 12,000 feet deep. But the echo would come back from 1,500 feet, a false bottom, a phantom floor that shouldn't be there. And it moved. During the day, this phantom bottom would stay deep, hovering around 2,000 feet. But at night, as the sun set, the bottom would rise. It would ascend through the water column, coming up to within a few hundred feet of the surface. And then, as dawn broke, it would sink back down into the abyss. The Navy was baffled. Was it a thermal layer? Was it a secret enemy technology? Was the ocean floor itself breathing? It took years to understand the truth, and the truth was far more unsettling than a thermal layer. The phantom bottom wasn't rock. It wasn't sand. It was meat. It was the deep scattering layer, a solid wall of living things. Billions upon billions of fish, shrimp, squid, and jellies, so dense, so tightly packed that their bodies, specifically their gas-filled swim bladders, were reflecting the sonar waves just like a solid seafloor. What the sonar operators had discovered was the largest migration on Earth. And it happens every single night. This is the Deal vertical migration. Every evening, as the sun sets, the monsters of the twilight zone leave the safety of the dark. They swim upward, a vertical journey of thousands of feet, to feed in the rich surface waters under the cover of night. They gorge themselves on plankton and small fish, bringing the terror of the deep into the shallows. And then, before the sun rises, before the light can reveal their grotesque forms to the visual predators of the surface, they retreat. They sink back down into the crushing dark, digesting their meals in the cold safety of the abyss. Think about the scale of that. It is a tidal wave of biomass, millions of tons of living creatures, rising and falling like a slow-motion lung. It means that the surface ocean and the deep ocean are not separate worlds. They are connected by this nightly elevator of teeth and hunger. It also means that if you are swimming in the open ocean at night, deep water beneath you, you are not alone. The bottom has come up to meet you. The discovery of the deep scattering layer changed our understanding of the ocean's biology. But it also deepened the mystery of the creatures themselves. Why do they look so strange? Why does depth equal horror? By the late 1940s and early 1950s, we began to understand that the creepiness is a function of isolation. These lineages have been separated from the surface world for millions of years. They have solved the problems of survival in ways that are alien to us because their environment is alien to us. On land or in shallow water, nature favors streamlining, speed, power. A tuna looks like a torpedo because that is the best shape to move through water quickly. But in the deep, the rules of hydrodynamics are secondary to the rules of ambush. Take the gulper eel, Uripharynx pelicanoides, It was described during this era of exploration, and it defies all logic of vertebrate anatomy. It is essentially a stomach attached to a mouth. Its jaws are so large relative to its body that it looks like a cartoon character that has swallowed a bomb. It has a tiny brain, tiny eyes, and a whip-like tail that glows pink at the tip. Why? Because, in the deep, meals are rare. You might go weeks, months, even a year without encountering food. If you find something, you eat it. It doesn't matter if it's bigger than you. It doesn't matter if it fights back. You unhinge your jaw, you expand your elastic stomach, and you engulf it. The gulper eel is a biological long-shot gambler. It bets everything on the one big score. This creates body plans that look distorted to us. Bloated stomachs, retractable teeth, skin that dissolves under touch. The blobfish, famous in internet culture for being ugly, is a creature of the deep. In its natural habitat, under high pressure, it looks like a normal fish. It is held together by the water around it. But bring it to the surface, remove the pressure that defines its existence, and it collapses into a gelatinous pile of misery. We call it a monster. But we are the ones who dragged it out of its gravity. The era of BB and the post-war sonar discoveries gave us the what. They showed us the cast of characters, but they couldn't fully explain the how. How do proteins function under that pressure? How do eyes see a single photon of light from a mile away? And deeper still, beyond the twilight zone, beyond the reach of the bathysphere, lay the midnight zone, the bathypelagic. If the twilight zone is the realm of the big eyes and the flashing lights, the midnight zone is the realm of the silence. Here, the pressure is so immense that even calcium carbonate begins to dissolve. Animals here don't have heavy skeletons, they are ghosts. The transition from the 1940s to the 1950s marked a shift in our relationship with the deep. It stopped being a place of myth and started being a place of cold, hard data. But the data didn't make it less scary. If anything, it made it worse, because now we knew they were there. We knew that beneath the hull of every ship, beneath the feet of every sailor, there was a universe of eyes looking up. We knew that the darkness wasn't empty space. It was a crowded room. The creep factor that we feel when we look at a picture of an anglerfish or a hatchetfish is not just aesthetic disgust. It is an evolutionary recognition. We are creatures of the sun. We are creatures of warmth and vision and gravity. These things are the antithesis of us. They are the anti-life. They thrive in conditions that would crush us, freeze us, and dissolve us. They are a reminder that the earth does not belong to us. The surface is a thin rind, a fragile skin on a planet that is mostly deep, dark, cold water. The average depth of the ocean is 12,000 feet. Most of the biosphere on this planet looks like the twilight zone. It is the norm. We are the freaks. We are the anomalies clinging to the sunlit roof of the world, unaware of the vast, breathing machinery operating in the basement. As the 1950s dawned, a new race began, not just to space, but to the bottom, to the very deepest point, the Challenger Deep. And what we would find there would challenge the very definition of life itself. But that is a story for the next descent. For now, stay in the twilight zone. Picture the bathysphere dangling on its cable, the only bubble of air in a universe of water. Imagine the face of William Beebe pressed against the quartz, staring into the black, and realizing that the black is staring back. There is a fish down there called the stoplight loosejaw. It has a secret weapon. Most bioluminescence is blue or green, because those travel furthest in water. Most deep-sea fish have eyes that can only see blue or green. They are blind to red. But the stoplight loosejaw produces red light. It has a red bioluminescent flashlight under its eye. It projects a beam of red light into the darkness, illuminating its prey. The prey cannot see the red light. They don't know they are being watched. The loosejaw is a sniper with night vision goggles in a world of the blind. That is the essence of the deep. It is a war of information, a war of seeing without being seen. And in the years between 1930 and 1950, we humans stumbled into the middle of the battlefield, turning on our flashlights, banging on the walls, and wondering why everything looked so terrified to see us. But the real terror isn't the teeth. It isn't the eyes. It isn't the pressure. The real terror is the isolation. When you are down there, you realize that the ocean is not a single place. It is a layer cake of worlds, stacked one on top of the other, separated by invisible barriers of temperature and salinity. A creature from the twilight zone can no more visit the surface than you can visit Mars. They are trapped in their layer, and we are trapped in ours. The bathysphere dives were a triumph of engineering, but they were also a lesson in humility. Beebe wrote about the absolute silence of the deep, a silence that felt heavy, a silence that felt old. 66 million years ago, when the asteroid struck and the dinosaurs burned, the deep ocean barely noticed. The great extinctions that wiped the land clean were often just ripples in the abyss. The coelacanth, a fish thought to have died with the dinosaurs, was found swimming comfortably in these depths in 1938. The deep is a museum. It is a vault. It keeps things, and sometimes It lets us see them, but only for a moment, only through a thick quartz window, illuminated by a spotlight that fades into the infinite dark. As we move away from the mid-century discoveries, the technology improves. The spheres get stronger. The lights get brighter. We begin to map the mountains and the trenches. But the feeling never goes away. The feeling that we are intruders. The feeling that when we shine a light into the abyss, we are disturbing a sleep that has lasted for eons. The twilight gate had been opened. The eyes in the darkness had been seen. And the world was about to learn that the deeper you go, the stranger the rules become. The monsters of the Mesopelagic were just the welcoming committee. The true aliens were waiting further down, as the cable winches the bathysphere back up, ascending through the blues, back to the light, back to the world of air and men. The feeling of relief is palpable. The hatch opens. The humid air of Bermuda rushes in. The sun is blinding, but Bibi knew. He knew that just a few hundred feet down, the sun was gone, and the dance of the hatchet fish, the silent glide of the viper fish, the nightly rise of the phantom bottom was continuing. It continues right now. While you sleep, the migration happens. The greatest movement of animals on the planet is happening beneath the waves, in the dark, in the cold. They are rising, and we are floating on the surface, blissfully unaware of the world that is moving to meet us. Before we descend to the abyssal plains, to the vents and the trenches where life is powered by the heat of the earth itself, take a moment to look at the ocean. Really look at it. It looks like a surface. It looks like a barrier. But it is a veil, and behind that veil, the eyes are watching. The 1950s would bring the Picards. It would bring the Times, Trieste asterisk. It would bring the conquest of the bottom. But the mystery of the middle, the terror of the twilight zone, remains. It is the largest habitat on Earth, and we have explored less of it than we have the surface of the moon. We know the names of the craters on Mars, but we don't know the names of the things swimming 3 miles off the coast of California. That is the legacy of this era. The realization of our own ignorance. The realization that the planet is not ours. We just live on the roof. Now, check your pressure seals. Dim the lights. The Mesopelagic is behind us. The Bathypelagic awaits. The water is getting colder. The darkness is getting thicker. And the things living in it, they are no longer just watching. They are listening. The year is 1960. The world is looking up. The space race is consuming the headlines, with rockets firing into the stratosphere and humanity's collective gaze fixed firmly on the moon. We are obsessed with the high ground, with the vacuum of space, with the stars. But while the eyes of the world are turned toward the heavens, 2 men are preparing to go in the opposite direction. They are preparing to go down, further down than anyone has ever gone, into a darkness so absolute it makes the night sky look bright by comparison. January 23rd. The Philippine Sea, some 200 miles southwest of Guam. The ocean is rough, chopping against the steel hull of a strange, ungainly vessel bobbing on the surface. This is the Times Trieste asterisk. It does not look like a ship, nor does it look like the sleek submarines of science fiction. It looks like a heavy steel balloon, a 50-foot tank filled with gasoline because gasoline is lighter than water and cannot be compressed, slung above a tiny, spherical observation chamber. Inside that sphere, a space barely 6 feet across, sit 2 men. Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh. They are about to do something suicidal. They are about to descend into the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point on the planet, a scar in the Earth's crust, located within the Mariana Trench. The depth is nearly 7 miles. The pressure at the bottom is over 8 tons per square inch. To understand that number, you have to visualize it. It is the equivalent of an elephant standing on your thumb. It is enough pressure to compress the air in your lungs until it becomes a toxic fluid. It is enough to crush a standard military submarine like an aluminum can. And these 2 men are going there voluntarily, sealed inside a steel ball with walls 5 inches thick, relying on 1960s technology, mechanical valves, and gasoline buoyancy to bring them back. The hatch clangs shut. The heavy bolts are tightened. The world of sunlight, of air, of wind and waves is sealed away. They flood the air tanks at the ends of the float. And the Trieste Times begins to sink. At first, the descent is gentle. The rocking of the surface waves fades, replaced by a smooth, silent, vertical slide. Through the single, cone-shaped plexiglass window, they watch the color of the world change. The bright, tropical blue of the surface water deepens. It shifts to a rich, vibrant azure, then to a heavy indigo, and finally to a bruised, twilight purple. They are passing through the epipelagic zone, the surface layer where sunlight fuels photosynthesis, where the plankton bloom and the tuna swim. This is the ocean we know. This is the ocean of documentaries and beach vacations. But it is a thin skin, a fragile veneer over the true bulk of the planet's water. At 600 feet, the light is failing. At 1,000 feet, it is gone. They have entered the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone, and this is where the creeping sensation begins. Because as the sun vanishes, something else takes its place. The darkness outside the window is not empty. It is alive. We need to pause the descent here, hanging in the black water, to understand what Walsh and Pickard are seeing, and what scientists in the decade that followed would scramble to understand. In this zone, where the sun is a distant memory, evolution has taken a strange turn. The creatures here do not live by the cycles of day and night as we know them. They live in a world of perpetual shadow, and to survive, they have become shadows themselves. This is the realm of the hatchetfish. Picture a silver coin, flattened and angular, with eyes that bulge upward, forever locked in a gaze toward the faint, dying light from the surface. They are desperate for photons, desperate to spot the silhouette of prey moving against the grey water above. But looking up is dangerous, because it means something below might be looking up at you. So the hatchetfish has evolved a solution. A cloak of invisibility, woven from light itself. Along its belly, it possesses rows of photophores, light-producing organs that match the exact intensity and color of the faint sunlight filtering down from above. It is called counter-illumination. If a predator looks up from below, they don't see a fish. They see nothing, just the seamless gray of the twilight ocean. The fish erases its own shadow. But there are things here that are far more unsettling than the hatchetfish. As the Trieste Times sinks deeper, past 2,000 feet, the water temperature plummets. The interior of the sphere begins to chill. Walsh and Pickard put on dry wool sweaters, then jackets. The condensation begins to form on the cold steel walls, trickling down in slow, shivering rivulets. Outside, the darkness is total now. We are entering the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. No sunlight has touched this water for centuries, and yet there are lights, ghostly, flickering blues and greens drifting in the void. Bioluminescence. In the 1960s and 70s, marine biologists were just beginning to grasp the sheer scale of this phenomenon. They realized that down here, light is not a given. It is a weapon. It is a lure. It is a scream. Consider the anglerfish. In the popular imagination, it is a monster, a set of jaws with a light bulb attached. But the reality, observed in these crushing depths, is far more disturbing. The female anglerfish is a floating stomach, a creature of pure appetite in a world where food is scarce. She drifts, black skin absorbing the biological lights of other creatures, rendering her invisible. Hanging from her forehead is the esker, the lure, glowing with a cold, bacterial light. In the absolute dark, it looks like a piece of food, a tiny worm or shrimp. When a curious fish moves in to investigate, snap. The jaws act as a trap, lined with translucent, needle-like teeth that fold inward. Once something goes in, it cannot come out. But the horror of the anglerfish goes deeper. It lies in their reproduction. In this vast, three-dimensional void, finding a mate is statistically impossible. You could swim for a lifetime and never meet another of your kind. So evolution, in its cold efficiency, solved the problem. The males are tiny, stunted creatures, born with no digestive system and a massive sense of smell. They are born to die, unless they find a female. And when a male finds her, he doesn't court her, he bites her. He latches onto her side and releases an enzyme that dissolves the skin of his mouth and the skin of her body. His blood vessels fuse with hers. He literally melts into her, becoming nothing more than a parasitic pair of testicles attached to her flank, fed by her blood, breathing her oxygen. A female might carry 3 or 4 of these vestigial males, a walking graveyard of her own lovers, ensuring that she can reproduce whenever she is ready. This is the logic of the deep. Connection is so rare that when it happens, it must be permanent. It must be total. The times Trieste times continues to fall. 10,000 feet. 15,000 feet. The pressure outside is climbing to unimaginable levels. The hull creaks. It is a sound that shouldn't exist. The sound of steel groaning under the weight of the ocean. Every square inch of that sphere is being squeezed by thousands of pounds of force. Inside, the air is cold and damp. The silence is profound, broken only by the hum of the rebreathers and the occasional sharp times, ping times, of metal contracting. At 20,000 feet, they enter the Hardal zone, the trenches. This is the underworld of the ocean, a place named after Hades, the kingdom of the dead. Here, the creatures change again. The showy lights of the midnight zone begin to fade. Energy is too precious to waste on glowing. The animals here are gelatinous, slow-moving, stripped of everything not essential for survival. We see the snailfish. It looks like a tadpole, made of wet tissue paper. It has no scales. Its skin is so thin, you can see its liver. Its bones are not calcified. They are cartilaginous, flexible, so they won't snap under the crushing weight. If you brought a snailfish to the surface, it would melt. It would lose its structure and dissolve into a puddle of goo. It is held together by the pressure that would kill us. It requires the crushing weight of the world just to exist. And then, a sound rips through the Times Trieste asterisk. A loud, violent crack, like a gunshot in a library. The whole sphere vibrates. Picard and Walsh freeze. They look at each other, eyes wide in the dim light of their instruments. They look at the window. Across the thick plexiglass of the entry tunnel, a hairline fracture has appeared. This is the moment. This is where the human instinct says, "Times turn back asterisk." You are 4 miles down. You are in a steel bubble that has just fractured. The ocean is knocking on the door, and it wants in. If that window fails, death will be instantaneous. It won't be like drowning. It will be an implosion. The air inside the sphere will be compressed to a point of incineration in a fraction of a second. They would be incinerated and crushed before their brains could even register the sound of the glass breaking. They check the readings. No water is entering. The crack is in the outer pane of the viewing port tunnel, not the pressure sphere itself. It is critical, but perhaps not fatal. They have a choice: abort the mission, drop the ballast, and flee back to the light, or trust the physics, trust the math, and keep falling into the dark. They choose the dark. They continue to descend. 25,000 feet, 30,000 feet. The clock ticks. The temperature inside is near freezing. They eat chocolate bars to keep their energy up, shivering in the damp cold. Finally, at 35,000 feet, the sonar picks up the bottom. It is coming up to meet them. Picard hits the switch to release some of the iron pellets used as ballast, slowing their descent. The Times Trieste time settles, gently, softly, and then impact. A cloud of silt, white as bone dust, billows up around the window. They have landed. They are sitting on the bottom of the world, 35,797 feet down, the Challenger deep. They peer out into the white cloud, waiting for it to settle. And when it does, they see it. Or at least, they think they see it. Picard reports seeing a flatfish, something like a sole or a flounder, lying on the sediment, looking back at them with two round eyes. A flatfish, Picard whispers into the recorder. At the very bottom. Years later, marine biologists would argue about this. They would say it was impossible, that fish cannot survive at that depth, that the biochemistry of vertebrate life breaks down under that much pressure. They would suggest it was a sea cucumber, or a trick of the light and shadow on the silt. But in that moment, in 1960, it changes everything. It means the deep is not dead. It means that even here, at the absolute limit of existence, in the crushing, freezing, eternal dark, life has found a way. For 20 minutes, they sit there. Two men in a can, eating chocolate, shivering, looking out at a landscape that no human eye has ever seen. They are more isolated than any astronaut will ever be. The moon is visible from Earth. Radio waves travel through space with ease. But here, under 7 miles of water, they are cut off. If something goes wrong, no one can help them. No one can even hear them scream. Then, it is time to leave. They drop the rest of the iron ballast. The magnets release the weights, and the Times, Trieste Times, lurches upward. The return trip is faster, a rocket ride toward the sun. When they break the surface hours later, the day has passed. The sun is setting. They have traveled to another planet and returned in time for dinner. But the story doesn't end with the splashdown. In fact, the mystery only deepens. You might think that after the Times Trieste asterisk, humanity would rush back to the deep, eager to explore this new frontier. But we didn't. The Times Trieste Times was retired. No one went back to the bottom of the Challenger deep for another 52 years. Why? Because the deep sea scared us. Not just the monsters, not just the teeth and the glowing eyes, but the alien nature of it. The 1960s and 70s were a golden age of biology. But the more we looked at the deep, the less we understood. In the years following the dive, researchers began to trawl the depths, dragging nets through the midnight zone to see what they could catch. And what they pulled up was the stuff of nightmares. They found the gulper eel, a creature that is almost entirely mouth. Its jaws are hinged in such a way that they can open wide enough to swallow an animal larger than itself. It has a long whip-like tail that glows pink at the tip. It drifts through the dark, mouth open like a cavern, waiting. It doesn't hunt. It exists as a trap. Its stomach is black and stretchable, designed to hide the bioluminescence of whatever unfortunate creature it swallows. Even inside the eel, the prey might still be glowing, trying to signal for help. But the eel's black stomach hides the evidence. They found the vampire squid, asterisk, Vampiroteuthis infernalis asterisk, the vampire squid from hell. It is a relic, a living fossil that has remained unchanged for millions of years. It lives in the oxygen minimum zone, a layer of the ocean where oxygen levels are so low that almost nothing else can survive. It suffocates its competition simply by living where they cannot. It has immense blue eyes, the largest in the animal kingdom relative to body size, designed to catch the faintest glimmer of light. When threatened, it doesn't ink like a normal squid. Ink is useless in the dark. Instead, it turns itself inside out, wrapping its spiked arms around its body like a cloak, becoming a ball of spines. And if that fails, it ejects a cloud of glowing mucus, a dazzling display of fireworks that confuses predators, leaving them biting at glowing slime while the squid vanishes into the black. These discoveries, made throughout the 60 seconds and 70 seconds, fundamentally changed our perception of life on Earth. We realized that the normal world, the world of green forests and blue skies, and animals with 2 eyes and 4 legs, is actually the minority. The majority of the habitable space on this planet is cold, dark, and high pressure. The monsters aren't the anomaly. We are. And then there is the psychological horror of the deep scattering layer. During World War II, sonar operators were baffled by a phenomenon they couldn't explain. Their instruments would show a sea floor at 1,000 feet during the day, but at night, that sea floor would rise to the surface. They thought it was shallow ground, phantom islands, appearing and disappearing. It wasn't until the post-war biological surveys that the truth was revealed. It wasn't land. It was life. It was millions upon millions of creatures. Lanternfish, jellyfish, krill, squid, migrating vertically every single day, hiding in the dark depths during the day to avoid predators, and rising to the surface at night to feed. It is the largest migration of biomass on the planet, and it happens every night. A silent, vertical pulse of hunger moving through the water column. The sonar wasn't bouncing off rock. It was bouncing off the swim bladders of billions of fish, a wall of living flesh so dense it looked like the bottom of the ocean. Imagine drifting in that water. Imagine being suspended at 500 feet at sunset. Below you, the darkness begins to stir. First, the tiny zooplankton rise, then the shrimp and the krill, then the lanternfish, millions of them, their bodies glowing with pale blue fire, and behind them, the predators, the squid, the sharks, the things with teeth like needles and eyes like saucers. You are in the path of a stampede, a slow-motion avalanche of life rising from the abyss to feed. This era of discovery, from the Trieste Times in 1960 to the biological surveys of the mid-70s, confirmed something profound. The deep ocean is not a void. It is a soup, a thick, viscous soup of gelatinous life, of predators and prey, locked in an eternal arms race of detection and evasion. But even with the lights of the submersibles, even with the nets and the sonar, we were only seeing the snapshots. We were seeing the creatures pulled out of their context, dead on the deck of a ship, their bodies ruptured by the pressure change, their eyes clouded, their colors faded. We called them monsters because they looked broken. We didn't understand that down there, in the pressure and the dark, they were perfect. The blobfish is a famous example of this misunderstanding. You've seen the picture, the pink, miserable, melting face that looks like a sad old man. The internet voted it the world's ugliest animal, but that's not what a blobfish looks like. That is what a blobfish looks like when you drag it up 3,000 feet and it suffers catastrophic decompression damage. Down there, in its home, the blobfish looks like a fish. It doesn't have a swim bladder because a bag of gas would explode under the pressure. Instead, its flesh is a gelatinous mass, slightly less dense than water, allowing it to float without expending energy. It is an engineering marvel. We brought it up to our world, destroyed it, and then mocked it for being ugly. This is the arrogance of the surface dweller. We judge the deep by our own standards. We look at the fangtooth with its teeth so long, it has special sockets in its brain case to accommodate them, and we see a demon. Nature sees a solution to the problem of grabbing a slippery meal in the pitch black, when you might only get one chance a week to eat. We look at the telescopic eyes of the barrel-eye fish, green orbs pointing upward inside a transparent, fluid-filled skull, and we see an alien. Nature sees a way to steal barely visible photons from the gloom. By 1976, the technology was changing. We stopped sending men in steel spheres and started sending robots. We started sending cameras that could handle the pressure better than we could. Cameras that didn't need to breathe, didn't need to stay warm, didn't feel fear when the window cracked. And what those cameras found in the next chapter of exploration would challenge the very definition of life itself. But before we move to the hydrothermal vents and the chemosynthetic revolutions of the late 70s, we have to sit with the feeling of the mid-century abyss. The feeling that Pickard and Walsh had as they fell. The feeling that the ocean is not ours. For millennia, humans looked at the ocean and saw a surface, a highway for ships, a larder for fish, a mirror for the sky. We thought the bottom was just sand and silence. But the descent of the times, Trieste times, shattered that silence. It showed us that the earth has a basement that is cold, dark, and filled with things that have been waiting there since before the dinosaurs walked the land. The creepiness of the deep-sea creatures isn't just about how they look. It's about where they live. They live in the part of the planet that we have discarded from our reality. They live in the pressure that would kill us. They live in the dark that would drive us mad. And the deeper you go, the more the rules of our world dissolve. The deeper you go, the more the creatures begin to look like hallucinations. Because down there, evolution is not limited by the sun. It is not limited by gravity in the way we are. It is sculpted by the crushing hug of the water and the desperate, eternal need to find a single spark of light. When Walsh and Pickard came back up, they were heroes. They were on the cover of Life magazine. They had conquered the deep, but in reality, they hadn't conquered anything. They had just peeked through the keyhole. They had knocked on the door of the haunted house, seen the eyes glowing in the foyer, and then ran back to the safety of the streetlights. The door is still there. The eyes are still watching. And, as we would soon discover, the house goes much, much deeper than we thought. As the 1970s progressed, a new theory began to take hold. If life could survive in the cold dark of the trenches, could it survive without the sun entirely? Could there be places where the energy for life didn't come from above, but from below, from the burning core of the earth itself? The Times, Trieste Times, was a mission of physical endurance. It proved we could get there, but the missions that followed were missions of biological revelation. We were about to discover that the creepiest things in the ocean aren't the ones that eat you. They are the ones that change your understanding of what it means to be alive. But to find them, we would have to stop looking for monsters in the water column and start looking at the floor. We would have to look for the smoke, because somewhere in the darkness of the Pacific Rift, something was burning. But that is a story for the next descent. For now, let us remain in the midnight zone. Let us drift with the currents, suspended between the surface and the bottom, surrounded by the silent, flashing conversation of a billion living lights. It is peaceful here, in a way. The pressure holds you. The darkness hides you. There is no weather, no seasons, no time, just the eternal hunt, just the slow, rhythmic pulse of the jellies and the sudden, snapping violence of the jaws. This is the world the Trieste Times visited. A world that doesn't know we exist. A world that doesn't care about our space races or our wars or our politics. It has been here for hundreds of millions of years, breathing in the dark, waiting, and it will be here long after we are gone. The hatch of the Trieste Times opens. The fresh Pacific air rushes in. Walsh and Pickard climb out, blinking in the harsh glare of the tropical sun. They are back, but a part of them, a part of our collective imagination, never really left. We left a piece of our soul down there in the silt of the Challenger Deep. We touched the bottom, and the bottom touched us back. And as the sun sets over the ocean, turning the waves to blood and gold, we have to wonder, what else is down there, just out of range of our lights? What else is swimming in the blind spots of our sonar? The ocean is deep, and we have only just begun to fall. 1977, a year of disco and Star Wars, a Voyager launching toward the edge of the solar system to look for life among the stars. But while humanity was looking up, casting its gaze toward the infinite black of space, A small group of geologists was looking down, preparing to drop into the infinite black of our own oceans. They were searching for heat. Theory suggested that the cold, heavy plates of the Earth's crust were pulling apart at the bottom of the Pacific, creating cracks where magma could bleed through. They called it the Galapagos Rift. They expected to find rocks. They expected to find warm water. They expected to find a desert, barren and silent. A place where life had given up millions of years ago. Instead, they found the impossible. The vessel was the DSV Alvin, a tiny titanium sphere capable of withstanding pressures that would crush a nuclear submarine like a soda can. Inside, crammed into a space smaller than the interior of a Volkswagen Beetle, were three men, pilot Jack Donnelly, and geologists Jack Corliss and Jerry Van Andel. They began their descent on a February morning, slipping beneath the waves and watching the blue light of the surface fade to indigo, then to navy, and finally to a darkness so complete it felt like a physical weight. 2.5 kilometers down. That is the depth. 2,500 meters of water pressing down on every square inch of the hull. The temperature outside is near freezing, hovering just above 2 degrees Celsius. It is a world of crushing uniformity. No seasons, no day or night, just the eternal cold and the pressure. The dive lasts for hours, a slow fall through the water column, watching the bioluminescent sparks of jellyfish and deep-sea shrimp flash and vanish in the gloom. When they reach the bottom, the floodlights click on. The beam cuts through the eternal night, illuminating a landscape of pillow basalt, strange, bulbous formations of rock that look like squeezed toothpaste, frozen in time. They begin to drive across this alien moonscape, searching for temperature spikes. They are looking for the thermal signature of the Earth bleeding heat into the ocean, and then they see it. At first, it looks like a shimmering mirage. The water ahead is blurring, waving, the way air distorts above a hot asphalt road on a summer day. It is the Schlieren effect, the visual signature of fluids mixing at different densities and temperatures. The pilots steer the Alvin closer, maneuvering the sub toward the source of the heat. The temperature gauge begins to climb. The water here isn't freezing, it is warm, it is comforting. But it isn't the water that stops their hearts. It is what is living in it. Surrounding the vents, clustered in dense, chaotic thickets, are white tubes. Giant white tubes, some of them 2 meters long, swaying in the current of the thermal exhaust. And emerging from the tops of these tubes are plumes of vivid, shocking red, not the dull brown of mud or the grey of rock, but the bright, oxygenated red of fresh blood. It is a garden, a thriving, pulsing, impossible garden in the absolute dark. Corliss grabs the radio. He calls up to the support ship, the Nor, floating kilometers above in the sunshine. He stammers, trying to describe what he is seeing. Giant clams, the size of dinner plates, clustered by the hundreds in the crevices of the rock. Mussels blanketing the seafloor. White crabs, blind and ghostly, scuttling over the mounds of shellfish. And the worms, the giant, lipstick red worms standing like sentinels in the dark. This discovery didn't just change marine biology. It broke it. To understand why, you have to understand the fundamental rule of life on Earth as we knew it in 1977. The rule was simple. The sun is the battery. Every living thing, from the grass in your backyard to the eagle in the sky to the plankton drifting in the ocean, runs on solar power. Plants use photosynthesis to turn sunlight into energy. Herbivores eat the plants. Carnivores eat the herbivores. Even the deep-sea scavengers, the hagfish and the rat-tails, are ultimately dependent on the sun, waiting for marine snow, the dead bodies and poop of surface animals, to drift down from the lit world above. Take away the sun, and the battery dies. The machine stops. Life ends. But here, in the Galapagos Rift, There was no sun. There hadn't been sunlight for millions of years. Yet here was biomass. Here was density. Here was a riot of life that rivaled a tropical rainforest or a coral reef. These animals weren't scavenging. They weren't waiting for scraps. They were feeding. But feeding on what? The answer lay in the shimmering water itself. The fluid gushing out of the seafloor was toxic. It was laden with hydrogen sulfide, a chemical that is lethal to almost all land animals. It smells like rotten eggs and kills by blocking the body's ability to use oxygen. To us, it is poison. To the creatures of the rift, it was fuel. They had discovered chemosynthesis. Deep inside the bodies of those giant tube worms, later named Riftia pachyptila, there is a secret. The worms have no mouth. They have no stomach. They have no gut. They have no anus. They are essentially a closed sac. If you were to dissect one, you would find an organ called the trophosome, filling much of their body cavity. And packed inside that organ are billions of bacteria. The worm acts as a bus. Its bright red plume is red because it is full of hemoglobin, the same molecule that makes your blood red. It captures oxygen from the seawater and hydrogen sulfide from the vent water and delivers them to the bacteria inside its body. The bacteria then use the chemical energy from the sulfide to forge sugar, feeding the worm from the inside out. It is a perfect symbiosis, a partnership forged in hell. The discovery of chemosynthesis meant that life did not need the sun. It meant that life could exist on planets far from their stars, on the icy moons of Jupiter or Saturn, huddled around volcanic cracks in the eternal dark. It expanded the definition of habitable space in the universe overnight. But as the initial wonder faded, a creeping realization took its place. The deeper we looked at these ecosystems, the stranger they became. The sheer alien nature of the adaptations required to survive here began to unsettle the scientists who studied them. In 1979, the Alvin returned to the deep, this time further north, to the East Pacific Rise. And there, they found something even more terrifying than the shimmering warm water vents. They found the black smokers, chimneys of sulfide rock, towering 10, 20, 30 meters high. They looked like the smokestacks of a subterranean factory, belching thick, black clouds into the ocean. But it wasn't smoke. It was superheated water, reaching temperatures of 350, sometimes 400 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to melt lead. The only reason it didn't boil into steam was the crushing pressure of the ocean keeping it liquid. And living right on the edge of this inferno, crawling on the chimney walls where the water was hot enough to cook a human hand in seconds, were the Pompeii worms, Alvinella pompeiana, 5 inches long, pale grey, covered in a fleece of bacteria that looks like fur. They build paper-thin tubes directly on the sides of the black smokers. Their tails sit in water that can reach 80 degrees Celsius, while their heads stick out into the near-freezing ocean water. They exist in a permanent temperature gradient that would rip most animals apart on a cellular level. They are the most heat-tolerant animals on Earth, and they look it. They look like something that evolved to survive an apocalypse. The bacteria on their backs form a thermal blanket, insulating them from the worst of the heat, detoxifying the heavy metals lead, arsenic, mercury that spew from the vents. Imagine a creature that thrives in a bath of acid and heavy metal, clinging to a chimney that screams with the energy of the Earth's core. A creature that lives its entire life in the dark, feeding on poison, coated in living fur. This is the reality of the abyssal rift. It is not just that the animals are strange, it is that the environment itself is hostile to the very concept of biology as we understand it. And yet, life persists. Throughout the 1980s, the discoveries continued, and with each one, the ocean floor seemed to become less like Earth and more like a fever dream. In 1984, exploring the Gulf of Mexico at depths of over 3,000 meters, scientists found the cold seeps. If the hydrothermal vents are the geysers of the deep, the cold seeps are the slow leaks. places where methane and brine bubble up through the sediment, not hot, but heavy and toxic. The chemistry is different here, slower, more stable, and the creatures that inhabit these seeps are ancient. Tube worms here can live for centuries. Some of the Lamellibranchia tube worms found at cold seeps are estimated to be over 250 years old. They grow millimeters at a time, silent witnesses to the passing of human history above. While empires rose and fell, while revolutions burned and wars were fought, these worms sat in the dark, motionless, breathing methane, growing slowly, inevitably, in the crushing silence. But the most disturbing feature of the cold seeps isn't the worms. It's the lakes, deep underwater. The brine water, hypersaturated with salt, is denser than the surrounding seawater. It doesn't mix. It pools. It flows downhill and collects in depressions on the seafloor, forming underwater lakes, lakes within the ocean. Imagine piloting a submersible across the abyssal plain and coming across a shoreline, a distinct beach of mussels and clams, surrounding a pool of milky, shimmering liquid. If you try to land the sub on the surface of this pool, you will bounce off. The interface is tangible, and inside these brine pools, nothing survives. The salinity is toxic. The oxygen is zero. It is a pickling jar. Scientists have dubbed one of these formations the jacuzzi of despair. Any fish or crab that wanders into the pool dies instantly, but they don't decay. The brine preserves them. So the bottom of the lake is littered with the corpses of animals that made a wrong turn, perfectly preserved in their death throes, lying in a graveyard that will last for decades, perhaps centuries. A lake of death at the bottom of the ocean, a place where the water itself kills the things that live in water. It is a paradox that the mind struggles to accept. As the millennium drew to a close, a new kind of ecosystem was discovered, one that linked the sunlit world above to the alien world below in a macabre cycle of consumption. The whale fall. Whales are the largest animals to ever exist. Blue whales, fin whales, sperm whales, massive engines of biology. When they die, they usually sink. A 40-ton carcass drifts down through the water column, a massive package of energy, fat, protein, and bone, falling like a gift from the gods. When it hits the abyssal plains, it triggers a feeding frenzy that can last for decades. In the late 1990s, researchers began to intentionally sink whale carcasses to study what happened to them. They watched as the scavengers arrived. First, the mobile scavengers, sleeper sharks, moving slowly through the gloom with their clouded eyes. Hagfish, those primitive slime-producing eels that tie themselves in knots to tear chunks of flesh from the dead. They strip the soft tissue in a matter of months. But it is what happens next that creates the true horror of the whale fall. After the meat is gone, the bones remain. Massive, oil-rich bones. And arriving to feast on this skeleton crew are the Osedax worms, commonly known as zombie worms. They were discovered in 2002, but their presence was inferred earlier. These are tiny, reddish worms that anchor themselves into the hard bone of the whale. They have no mouth. They have no stomach. Instead, they secrete acid from their skin. They dissolve the bone of the whale, melting a path into the marrow. Then, using a root system green, branching roots that look like moss, they invade the bone and digest the fats and oils inside. Aided again by symbiotic bacteria, the female worms are the ones you see, the red plumes waving from the whale's ribs like flowers growing on a grave. But the males? The males are microscopic. They live inside the females. Dozens, sometimes hundreds, of microscopic males living inside the gelatinous tube of a single female, existing only to fertilize her eggs. It is a reproductive strategy that makes sense in the vast emptiness of the ocean. If you find a whale bone, you never let go. You bring your mates with you. You turn yourself into a colony. The Osedax carpet the bones. They consume the history of the animal. They erase the evidence of its existence. Given enough time, a whale fall disappears completely, turned into worm biomass, dispersed back into the dark water. This is the reality of the deep sea revealed between 1977 and 2000. It is not a static, empty void. It is a biological refinery. It is a place where rock turns into life, where toxic chemicals feed giants, where death is not an end, but a dinner bell that rings for 100 years. The deeper we went, the more we realized that our rules did not apply. On the surface, life fights against the cold. In the deep, life embraces the heat of volcanoes. On the surface, oxygen is life. In the deep, oxygen is scarce, and sulfide is king. On the surface, we look for eyes to make a connection with another living being. In the deep, eyes are often useless, or they are monstrously enlarged, seeking single photons of light, or they are gone entirely, replaced by chemical sensors that taste the water for the signature of food or fear. But perhaps the most unsettling realization of this era was not about the animals, but about us. We had spent centuries mapping the moon. We had named the craters of Mars. We had sent probes to the rings of Saturn. But until 1977, we didn't know that the largest mountain range on Earth, the mid-ocean ridge system, stretching 65,000 kilometers around the globe like the seam on a baseball, was alive. We didn't know that the ocean floor was leaking. We didn't know that the biosphere of our own planet extended so deep into the rock. We share this planet with aliens. We always have. They don't come from the sky in flying saucers. They don't speak in radio waves. They are here, beneath us, right now. As you listen to this, billions of tube worms are swaying in the dark, feeding on the blood of the earth. Swarms of blind shrimp are dancing around chimneys of superheated water. Zombie worms are dissolving the ribs of a leviathan. They are waiting in the dark. And as the 21st century dawned, technology was about to give us the eyes to see them even clearer, to go deeper, to push past the vents and the seeps into the open water of the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones, into the twilight zone. If the floor of the ocean was the realm of the weird, the water column above it was the realm of the nightmare, because on the floor, at least there is structure. There is a bottom. There is a place to rest. In the mid-water, there is nothing. No floor, no ceiling, no walls. Just endless, three-dimensional space where danger can come from above, from below, from any direction. And evolution, operating in this limitless void, produced forms that defy sanity. But before we ascend into the crushing black water, take a moment to look back at the vent one last time. Picture the red plumes of the tube worms glowing in the lights of the submersible. Picture the black smoke billowing up into the eternal night. It looks like a city. It looks like a factory. It looks like hell, but it is alive, and it forces us to ask a question, one that makes us feel very small and very fragile. If life can thrive here, in the pressure and the poison and the dark, what does it need us for? The surface world, the world of green trees and blue skies and sunlight, is fragile. A single asteroid, a single volcanic winter, and the photosynthesis stops. The plants die, the herbivores die, vidi. But the vents? The vents wouldn't even notice. If the sun went out tomorrow, the tube worms would keep growing. The Pompeii worms would keep dancing on their chimneys. The deep biosphere would carry on, indifferent to the silence above. They are the backup hard drive of Earth's biology. They are the survivors. And they will be here long after we are gone. Now, turn off the lights of the sub. Let the darkness rush back in. Watch the red plumes disappear into the black. Feel the cold of the hull radiating against your shoulder. We are leaving the bottom. We are ascending, but we are not going to the surface. Not yet. We are stopping halfway. We are stopping in the zone, where the sunlight finally dies completely. The zone of the giant squid. The zone of the jellies. the zone of the anglerfish. The abyss was strange. But the midwater? The midwater is hungry. The years from 1977 to 2000 taught us that the ocean floor was alive. The next era of exploration would teach us that the water itself was watching. The technology of the new Millennium ROVs, high-definition cameras, molecular biology, was about to strip away the last layers of privacy from the deep ocean. And what we found staring back at us from the gloom were not just animals. They were monsters of efficiency, creatures that had dissolved their own bodies to save energy, creatures that used light as a weapon, creatures that had evolved jaws that could unhinge to swallow prey larger than themselves, because in the desert of the deep, you never refuse a meal. The rift was about chemistry. The midwater is about the hunt. And as we drift up from the vents, leaving the alien city behind, we enter the domain of the phantoms. In the 1980s, biologists began to understand the scale of the deep scattering layer. It wasn't just a sonar anomaly, it was a migration. Every night, millions of tons of biomass move from the deep ocean toward the surface to feed, and every morning, they retreat back into the dark to hide. It is the largest migration of animals on Earth, and it happens every single day. But there are things that don't migrate, things that wait. Between the discovery of the vents and the turn of the millennium, our understanding of the ocean's architecture fundamentally shifted. We stopped seeing it as a bowl of water with life sprinkled on top. We began to see it as a complex, layered, three-dimensional engine, and the deeper you go, the more the pressure shapes you. Pressure is the invisible hand of the deep. At the surface, the air pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. At the depth of the hydrothermal vents, it is over 3,500 pounds per square inch. It's like having an elephant stand on your thumb. To survive this, you cannot have air spaces, you cannot have lungs, you cannot have swim bladders unless they are filled with oil or wax. You must become liquid. You must become gelatinous. Your bones must become flexible. Your muscles watery. This is why the creatures of the deep look so creepy to us. It isn't because they are trying to be scary. It is because they are trying not to be crushed. The blobfish, voted the world's ugliest animal, looks like a melted sad man on the surface. But down at depth, down where the pressure holds it together, it looks like a fish. It is only when we drag it up to our world, to our low pressure, that it falls apart. We are the ones who make it a monster. But the tube worms don't need our pity. They are built of tougher stuff, chitin, the same material that makes the exoskeleton of a crab. The tubes of Riftia are made of chitin, tough, flexible, permanent. They build their own skeletons on the outside. As the 20th century ended, the map of the ocean floor was still mostly blank. We had mapped the surface of Mars in better detail than our own seabed. But the pinpricks of light we had shone into the abyss at the Galapagos, at the East Pacific Rise, in the Gulf of Mexico, had revealed enough to shatter our arrogance. We used to think the deep sea was a graveyard, a place where things went to die. A cold, dark, pressurized tomb. The discovery of the vents proved that it was actually a cradle. Some scientists even believe it might be the time's cradle, the place where life began. Think about it. The surface of the early Earth was a nightmare. Meteor bombardments, deadly UV radiation because there was no ozone layer, volcanic storms. It was not a safe place for a fragile, single-celled organism to get its start. But deep down, protected by kilometers of water, huddled against a warm vent, surrounded by a cocktail of chemicals just waiting to be mixed into complex molecules, it is the perfect nursery. We may be the anomalies, we, the surface dwellers, living under the harsh, cancerous light of a variable star, enduring ice ages and heat waves. The tube worms might be the original Earthlings. They might be looking at us if they had eyes. wondering how we survive up here in the vacuum, exposed to the void of space. This perspective shift from looking down with pity to looking down with awe defined the era of deep-sea exploration from 1977 to 2000. We went looking for resources. We found our ancestors, or at least our metabolic cousins. But the story doesn't end with the worms. The worms are just the furniture. The creeping, crawling, swimming things that live among them are the actors. There is a crab called the Hoff crab, discovered later but hinted at in these early dives. It has a hairy chest. Why? To grow bacteria. It farms its own food on its own body. It is a gardener that is also the garden. There are snails with feet made of iron scales. Chrysomalon squamiferum, the scaly-foot gastropod. It pulls iron sulfide out of the water and builds armor plating. It is a magnetic snail. It is the only animal on Earth known to use iron sulfide as a skeletal material. It is a biological tank. These are not creatures of fantasy. They are creatures of necessity. And as the calendar rolled over to the year 2000, as the world worried about Y2K and the internet age, the scientists of the deep were preparing for a new golden age of discovery. They were building better robots. They were designing sensors that could taste DNA in the water. They were preparing to answer the question, what lies in the Haddle Zone? What lies in the trenches? Below the abyss, there is another layer. The trenches, the deepest scars in the Earth's crust. Marianas, Tonga, Kermadec. If the abyssal plains are the basement of the world, the trenches are the sub-basement, the hidden crawl space. But that is a story for later. For now, let us rest in the glow of the black smokers. Let the heat wash over the viewport. Let the red plumes sway in the current. The rift is open. The chemicals are flowing. The garden is in bloom. And in the silence of the deep, a paradox echoes. The most alien place in the solar system is right here at home. And the creepiest thing isn't that life exists there. The creepiest thing is how much it thrives. Because if life can thrive there, in the dark, in the poison, in the crushing weight, then it can thrive anywhere. And that means we are not alone. Not in the universe. And certainly not on Earth. The descent continues. The 26th of March, 2012. The Pacific Ocean is a vast, heaving mirror of blue, reflecting a tropical sky that looks innocent, almost serene. But beneath the waves, something is happening that hasn't happened in 50 years. A man is falling. He is encased in a sphere of steel just 43 inches wide, a tiny, claustrophobic bubble of air dropping through the water column like a stone thrown down a well. The man is James Cameron, a filmmaker known for creating worlds on screen. But today, he is leaving the known world behind entirely. He is piloting the Times Deep-Sea Challenger Asterisk, a vertical torpedo of a submarine, bright green and built for one purpose, to reach the bottom of the world. He falls. The sunlight fades from bright turquoise to a bruised twilight blue, and then, within minutes, to absolute black. The photic zone, the realm of photosynthesis and sharks and whales, is gone. He is dropping at a rate of 150 meters per minute. The digital depth gauge on his dashboard flickers, the numbers climbing higher and higher, measuring a distance that no sunlight has ever traveled. 8,000 meters, 3,000 meters, 6,000 meters. He enters the Haddal Zone. Named after Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, this is the frontier, where the ocean stops being a habitat and starts becoming a geological vice. The water pressure outside the hull is climbing to levels that are difficult for the human mind to comprehend. 8 tons per square inch. It is the equivalent of an elephant standing on your thumb. It is enough to crush a nuclear submarine like an empty soda can. If the hull were to fail, if a microscopic flaw were to give way, the water would enter at supersonic speeds. Cameron wouldn't even have time to register that he was dying. He would simply cease to exist. instantly liquefied by the ocean itself, but he keeps falling. Down here, in the cold silence of the trench, the water is clear as gin. There is no plankton to cloud the view, no currents to stir up the silt, just an endless, vertical drop into the void. And waiting for him at the bottom, in the Challenger Deep, the deepest point on the surface of the earth, are the ghosts. We tend to think of the deep ocean as a place of monsters. We imagine teeth and tentacles, giant squids wrestling sperm whales, anglerfish with their bioluminescent lures and needle-like fangs. And in the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone, above the trenches, those monsters do exist. Evolution there has produced nightmares of efficiency, mouths that can swallow prey larger than the predator itself, eyes that can spot a single photon in the darkness. But the Haddle Zone, the realm below 6,000 meters, is different. It is a place of such extreme constraint that nature has been forced to abandon the monstrous and embrace the strange. The pressure here is the ultimate architect, and it demands a specific kind of blueprint. When Cameron finally touches down, creating a slow-motion puff of sediment on the valley floor 10,908 meters below the surface, he looks out the window. He expects to see something alien. What he sees is a desert, a moonscape of pale, silty beige, stretching out into the darkness, illuminated only by the lights of his sub. It looks barren, it looks dead, but it isn't. Life here is subtle. It is hiding. It has stripped away everything unnecessary. No scales, no pigmentation, no heavy bones. In the glare of the lights, something moves. It isn't a leviathan. It isn't a kraken. It is a ghost. Meet the Mariana snailfish. Asterisk. Pseudoliparus swirei asterisk. It is the deepest living fish ever discovered. A creature that thrives where nothing with a skeleton should be able to survive. It doesn't look like a fish you would see in an aquarium. It looks like a tadpole made of wet tissue paper. Its skin is completely transparent, revealing the pinkish organs and muscles underneath. It has no scales to protect it, because scales require calcium, and at this depth, the pressure is so intense that calcium dissolves. It has tiny, beady eyes that serve almost no purpose in the eternal night. It glides through the water with a slow, undulating motion, its pectoral fins fluttering like delicate wings. It is small, perhaps only twice the length of a human hand. But do not let its fragility fool you. This creature is a marvel of biological engineering, a fortress of adaptation built to withstand the weight of the entire ocean. To understand why the snailfish is so creepy, you have to understand what it is doing just by existing. At the molecular level, extreme pressure forces proteins to fold incorrectly. It distorts the very enzymes that make life possible. For a normal fish, diving to this depth would be like stepping into a microwave. Its biology would simply unravel. But the snailfish is packed with a chemical called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. This molecule acts as a stabilizer, a chemical brace that holds the fish's proteins in shape against the crushing weight of the water. The deeper a fish lives, the more TMAO it needs, and the snailfish is full of it. It is literally saturated with the stuff, giving its flesh a distinct, pungent smell that would be overpowering if you could bring it to the surface. But you can't bring it to the surface. If you were to catch a Mariana snailfish and reel it up, it would melt. Without the immense pressure of the trench to hold it together, its tissues would lose their structure, its enzymes would fail, and it would dissolve into a gelatinous goo before it ever reached the boat. It is a creature that exists only in hell. Bring it to heaven, and it falls apart. Cameron watches the bottom. He spends hours down there, drifting over the sediment. He sees amphipods, giant shrimp-like creatures called times Hirondellea gigas asterisk. On the surface, an amphipod is the size of a flea, a tiny speck you might brush off your leg at the beach. Here, in the dark, they grow to the size of a human fist. Gigantism is common in the deep, a side effect of the cold and the oxygen-rich water. These pale, armored scavengers swarm over anything that falls from above: dead whales, sunken logs, the detritus of the surface world. They are the cleanup crew of the abyss, stripping carcasses to the bone in a matter of hours. They swarm the bait arms of landers like maggots on a corpse, a writhing mass of pale legs and antennae, eating with a voracious, mindless hunger. But Cameron's dive, for all its technological triumph, was brief. A few hours on the bottom, a fleeting glimpse into a room of the house that had been locked for decades. Mechanical failures forced him to ascend earlier than planned. The hydraulic arm failed. Thrusters began to glitch. The ocean was fighting back, pushing against the intruder with its passive, crushing strength. He dropped his weights and rocketed back to the surface, leaving the ghosts behind. The trench went quiet again. The silt settled. The snailfish resumed their slow, silent patrol. For 7 years, no human returned. The darkness reclaimed the Challenger deep. But humans are persistent. We are driven by a need to see, to map, to conquer. And in 2019, the silence was broken again. This time, it wasn't a filmmaker in a torpedo. It was a private equity investor named Victor Vescovo, piloting the Times limiting factor asterisk. This machine was different. Where Cameron's sub was a prototype, a one-off experiment, the Times limiting factor Times was a commercial vehicle, certified for repeated dives to full ocean depth. It was built like a tank, a sphere of titanium 90 millimeters thick, machined to a perfect sphere within a fraction of a millimeter. It was designed not just to visit the bottom, but to stay there, to map it, to hunt. Vescovo's mission, the 5 Deeps expedition, aimed to reach the bottom of all 5 oceans. But the Challenger Deep was the prize. Between April and May of 2019, the Times limiting factor Times dove into the trench 4 times. Vescovo went down alone. Then he brought others. They spent hours trawling the bottom, filming in high definition, collecting samples with robotic precision. They illuminated the darkness with 60,000 lumens of LED light, turning the midnight zone into high noon. And what they found was both wondrous and horrifying. They found more snailfish. They found the ethereal snailfish, a close cousin of the Mariana variety, drifting like a spectre in the gloom. They captured footage of these creatures engaging in behaviors never seen before. They weren't solitary, lonely wanderers. They were social. They congregated. They interacted. In one sequence, a group of snailfish swarm a bait canister, bumping into each other, snapping at the amphipods. They looked almost cute, like tadpoles in a pond. But then you remember where they are. You remember that they are swimming in a pressure cooker. You remember that their eyes are seeing nothing but the artificial light of an alien spaceship. And before that, they had seen nothing at all for millions of generations. They are creatures of the void, thriving in an environment that is antithetical to us. And then, the camera catches something else, something that sends a chill through the spine of anyone watching, a chill colder than the freezing water outside the hull. Drifting across the bottom, half buried in the beige silt, 10,928 meters down, is a plastic bag, a candy wrapper, a piece of synthetic refuse from a world 7 miles above. It sits there, preserved by the lack of oxygen and light, a pristine artifact of human negligence. It is a jarring, violent intrusion of the mundane into the majestic. We have sent our trash to the one place on Earth we cannot easily reach. The ghosts of the Challenger Deep are swimming through our garbage. This discovery changes the narrative. It shifts the tone from exploration to crime scene investigation. We analyze the water samples brought back by Vescovo's team. We test the amphipods, the scavengers that eat the dead things falling from above. And we find it, microplastics, in the guts of the amphipods, in the tissues of the snailfish. 100% of the animals tested in some of these deep trenches contain plastic fibers in their stomachs. Think about that. The Mariana snailfish lives in the most remote, inaccessible habitat on the planet. It is separated from us by 7 miles of crushing water. It has never seen the sun. It has never felt the wind. And yet, it has synthetic polymers woven into its body. We have touched them. We have poisoned them without ever knowing they were there. The creepy factor shifts. It isn't the fish that are the monsters anymore, but the biology of the Hadal frontier continues to surprise us. As Vescovo's team mapped the trench, they began to understand the limits of life itself. Why do the snailfish stop at around 8,000 to 8,200 meters? Why don't they go all the way to the very bottom of the Serena Deep or the Challenger Deep? The answer lies in osmosis. Fish rely on osmosis to keep their cells hydrated. They maintain a balance of salt and water inside their bodies, different from the seawater outside. To do this, they produce osmolytes, molecules that bind to water. The most potent of these is TMAO, the same molecule that protects their proteins from pressure. But there is a limit, a physiological ceiling. Scientists have calculated that at a depth of around 8,200 meters, a fish would need so much TMAO in its cells to counteract the pressure that its internal fluids would become more salty than the seawater around it. The osmosis would reverse. The water would rush into the fish's cells, causing them to swell and burst. Or the concentration of TMAO would become toxic, crystallizing the proteins it was meant to protect. So, 8,200 meters is the theoretical line of death for fish. It is an invisible electric fence stretched across the ocean. Below this line, no fish can survive. The snailfish live right on the edge, swimming along the precipice, pushing their biology to the absolute breaking point. They are the astronauts of the fish world, skimming the atmosphere of a planet they cannot land on. Below that line, the ocean belongs to the invertebrates, the amphipods, the sea cucumbers, the holothurians. The sea cucumbers of the Hadal zone are not the lumpy, inert sausages you see in shallow tide pools. They are translucent, gelatinous, and surprisingly mobile. Some of them have evolved sail-like appendages, allowing them to swim through the water column like mesmerizing, slow-motion dancers. Asterisk. Enipniastes eximia asterisk. The headless chicken monster captures the imagination of the internet whenever it is filmed. It looks like a severed turkey neck drifting in the void, pulsing and glowing. But down here, in the Challenger Deep, the sea cucumbers are even simpler. Small, pale slugs sifting through the sediment, eating the marine snow, the constant rain of detritus, fecal matter, and dead plankton that falls from the surface. They are the ultimate bottom feeders. They eat the waste of the world, and they thrive on it. The silence of the trench is another thing that explorers note. When the thrusters are off, when the robotic arms are still, the silence is absolute. It is a heavy physical weight. But hydrophones dropped into the deepest part of the ocean have revealed that it isn't truly quiet. The deep ocean acts as a sound channel, a massive acoustic highway. Sound waves can travel for thousands of miles without losing their energy. In 2015, a hydrophone, listening in the Challenger Deep, picked up a sound that terrified the researchers who first heard it. A low, moaning, metallic drone. It sounded like a machine. It sounded like a ship's engine grinding against the seafloor. It lasted for minutes, rising and falling in pitch. Was it a geological shifting of the plates? The Mariana Trench is a subduction zone. After all, a place where the Pacific tectonic plate is sliding violently beneath the Mariana Plate. The friction creates earthquakes, slab quakes, that ring the planet like a bell. Or was it a whale? A baleen whale calling out in the dark. Its voice carried down into the abyss by the weird physics of underwater acoustics. It turned out to be a minke whale, calling from miles above. The sound had filtered down, distorted, and amplified by the trench walls, turning a song of life into a ghostly moan of the damned. Even the sounds of the deep are deceptive. They are echoes of a world that feels light years away. The exploration continued. In 2020, 2021, 2022, the Times limiting factor Times was sold to Gabe Newell, the founder of Valve, and the exploration arm was renamed Inkfish. The missions became more scientific, more systematic. They weren't just looking for depth records anymore. They were looking for understanding. They found bacterial mats, strange, fuzzy orange carpets covering rocks at depths where no light should allow life to bloom. These bacteria don't photosynthesize, they chemosynthesize. They eat chemicals seeping out of the earth, methane, sulfur, hydrogen. They are living on the breath of the planet itself. These are likely the oldest life forms on Earth, or at least the closest relatives to the first life that emerged from the primordial soup. In the Hadal trenches, we are looking back in time. We are seeing the Earth as it was 4 billion years ago, before the sun became a source of energy, when life was just a stubborn chemical reaction clinging to a cooling rock. And yet, despite the lights, despite the titanium spheres and the 4K cameras, the Hadal frontier remains fundamentally unknowable. We have mapped 100% of the surface of Mars. We have mapped the dark side of the Moon, but we have mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor in high resolution. The Challenger Deep is a pinpoint on a map that is mostly blank. Every time the sub descends, the pilot knows that they are entering a hostile jurisdiction. They are trespassers. The water wants inside. The cold wants to steal their heat. The darkness wants to swallow their light. There is a moment that every deep-sea explorer describes. It usually happens on the ascent. You have spent hours at the bottom, surrounded by the ghosts and the silt and the crushing weight. You drop your ballast weights, steel plates that fall away into the mud, leaving a permanent mark of your visit, and the sub begins to rise. You watch the depth gauge count down. 10,000 meters, 8,000 meters, 5,000 meters. You are rising through the midnight zone, past the vampire squids and the gulper eels. You are rising through the twilight zone, past the lanternfish and the hatchet fish. And then, finally, you see it. Blue. The first faint hint of blue in the window above you. After hours of black, it looks like a hallucination. It is the most beautiful color you have ever seen. It means safety. It means air. It means home. But as you break the surface, as the hatch pops open and the warm tropical air rushes into the cabin, you carry something back with you. A sense of scale. A realization that the world we live in, the sunlit world of trees and cities and people, is just a thin skin on the surface of a deep, dark planet. Most of the livable space on Earth is not green forests or blue skies. It is cold, black, crushing water. We are the anomaly. They, the ghosts of the trench, the snailfish and the amphipods and the silent sea cucumbers, they are the norm. The deep ocean doesn't get creepier because it is full of monsters. It gets creepier because it is full of emptiness. It is creepier because it is indifferent to us. It doesn't care if we are there. It doesn't care if we live or die. It just is, ancient, silent, and waiting. And as we continue to probe the Hadal frontier, sending our robots and our billionaires down into the dark, we have to ask ourselves, are we discovering the deep, or are we just disturbing its sleep? Because down there, in the 11-kilometer dark, things move slowly. Evolution takes its time. The snailfish glides on its transparent wings, blind and delicate and perfect. It has survived for millions of years without us. It has survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It has survived the ice ages. It will likely survive us too. Unless, of course, the plastic gets it first. The Times limiting factor Times sits in its cradle on the back of the support ship. Times pressure drop asterisk. The crew hoses down the salt. They download the data hard drives. They inspect the acrylic viewports for microfractures, the tiny spiderwebs of stress that could spell disaster on the next dive. The engineers talk in hushed tones about O-rings and variable ballast. But look at the footage again. Look at the face of the snailfish. It has no expression. It cannot smile or frown. It just exists. A ghost in the machine of the ocean. We have barely scratched the surface of the bottom. There are trenches we haven't visited. The Tonga Trench, the Philippine Trench, the Kermadec, deep scars in the Earth's crust that reach down into the mantle. Who knows what lives in those other valleys of the deep? Are there different species of snailfish? Are there creatures that defy the TMAO limit, finding some other chemical loophole to survive the crush? Are there relics of the Cretaceous hiding in the dark? Refugees from a surface world that became too dangerous? Science says no. Science says the biology is constrained by physics. But science also said life couldn't exist without the sun until we found the hydrothermal vents. Science said nothing could survive in the Mariana Trench until we went there and found it teeming with life. The ocean has a way of humbling our certainties. It keeps its secrets in the dark, releasing them only one by one, only to those brave enough or foolish enough to fall for 4 hours through the void to ask the question. So tonight, as you lay in the dark, listening to the wind outside your window, imagine the silence of the Challenger Deep. Imagine the weight of 11 kilometers of water pressing down on the roof of the world. Imagine the snailfish, drifting through the eternal night, waiting for the next rain of food from the world above. It is down there right now. As you breathe, it swims. As you sleep, it survives. The frontier is not closed. It is just deep. And the deeper you go, the quieter it gets, until all you can hear is the beating of your own heart and the slow, rhythmic pulse of a planet that is mostly water, mostly dark, and mostly unknown. This is the reality of the Hadal Zone. It is not a place of terror, but a place of awe, a place where life has been stripped to its absolute essentials. It is the final boundary, and the ghosts are watching us from the other side of the glass. We have traveled from the sunlit surface, where life is frantic and fleeting, down through the twilight zone, where the shadows begin to lengthen, and finally into the midnight zone and beyond, into the abyss. We have seen teeth that are essentially glass needles, jaws that can unhinge to swallow, prey whole, and gelatinous bodies that would disintegrate if you brought them up to our world. And at the very bottom, in the crushing silence of the Hadal trenches, we found something else. We found giants. It is called abyssal gigantism, and it is perhaps the single most unsettling phenomenon in the deep ocean. It violates our intuitive sense of scale. In our world, the world of gravity and air and sunshine, insects are small, crustaceans are manageable. A pill bug fits on the tip of your finger. A spider crab fits in a bucket. But down here, the rules are different. Down here, the giant isopod grows to the size of a house cat, a pale, armored tank scavenging the seafloor. The Japanese spider crab spans nearly 4 meters from claw to claw, a skeletal construct that could straddle a compact car. The colossal squid, the largest invertebrate on Earth, possesses eyes the size of dinner plates, designed to catch the faintest glimmer of bioluminescence in the absolute dark. When we look at these creatures, we shudder. We call them monsters. We make movies about them rising from the depths to destroy us. We label them creepy because they feel wrong. They feel like distortions of the natural order, errors in the code of life. But here is the thing. They are not the errors. We are. To understand why deep-sea creatures get creepier, the deeper you go, you have to stop looking at them with human eyes. You have to stop judging them by the standards of a primate that evolved on the African savanna. We think of the deep ocean as an extreme environment, a hellscape of crushing pressure and freezing temperatures. But the deep ocean is the largest habitat on Earth. It constitutes more than 90% of the livable volume of our planet. The cold, the dark, the pressure, that is the norm. That is the baseline of existence for life on Earth. The sunlit surface, the thin skin of atmosphere, where we build our cities and live our lives, that is the anomaly. That is the extreme environment. The gigantism we see in the abyss isn't a mutation. It is an adaptation to efficiency. It is called Kleiber's law, or perhaps a variation of Bergman's rule. In the freezing water, metabolism slows down. Life moves at a different pace. Animals down here live longer, grow slower, and reach sizes that would be metabolically impossible in the frenetic, energy-burning world above. The giant isopod isn't a monster. It is a masterpiece of energy conservation, capable of surviving for years without a single meal, waiting in the stillness for a whale fall to drift down from the heavens like manna. The colossal squid isn't a nightmare. It is a solution to the problem of hunting in a void. A creature built to drift and strike with minimal effort. They are big because the cold allows them to be. They are terrifying because they are efficient. And they are creepy only because they remind us of our own fragility. Think about the pressure. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the water pushes against every square inch of space with a force of over 1,000 atmospheres. It is the equivalent of having an elephant stand on your thumb. We look at the blobfish, with its sagging flesh and miserable expression, and we mock it. We vote it the ugliest animal in the world. But we are looking at a corpse that has been dragged out of its home. We are looking at a creature that has suffered the most catastrophic decompression imaginable. Down there, in the dark, the blobfish is taut, sleek, perfectly buoyant. It is a creature of the high pressure. If you were to put a human at that depth, we would be the ones who looked broken. We would be the ones who looked like monsters. The deeper you go, the more the human context fades away. We are intruders here. We are visiting a world that does not need us, does not know us, and does not care that we exist. The creepiness we feel is a defensive mechanism. It is our biology telling us that we do not belong. It is the same feeling you get when you look off the edge of a cliff or stare too long into the night sky. It is the vertigo of realizing that you are small, and the universe is vast and indifferent. For millions of years, while our ancestors were learning to walk upright, learning to use fire, learning to speak, the creatures of the deep were already there. They were gliding through the darkness in silence. They survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. They survived the ice ages. They survived the shifting of continents. While we worry about our politics and our wars and our trivialities, the abyssal plains remain unchanged, a world of eternal night, where time is measured not in hours or days, but in the slow accumulation of marine snow, the dust of the upper world drifting down to feed the lower. There is a tragedy in our relationship with the deep. We fear it, yet we are destroying it. We treat the ocean as a bottomless pit, a place to dump our trash and our chemicals, assuming that the darkness will swallow it all. But the darkness is not empty. It is full. It is full of life that has found a way to thrive in conditions we can barely comprehend. It is full of ancient lineages that have kept the watch for hundreds of millions of years. So, when you see the long, needle-toothed grin of a viperfish, or the ghostly, translucent skin of a snailfish from the Hadal Zone, do not turn away. Do not dismiss them as horrors. Recognize them for what they are. They are the true inheritors of the earth. They are the silent majority of the biosphere. They are the darkness that defines the light, and they will be swimming in that crushing blackness long after the sun has set on the human experiment. The deep sea is not a place of horror. It is a place of solitude. It is a place where life has been stripped of everything, unnecessary color, warmth, speed, until only the essential remains. It is the final frontier. Not in space, but right here beneath us. A world of monsters that are only monsters because they are perfect for a world that would kill us in an instant. But even in this world of absolute silence, where the pressure is enough to crush a submarine like a soda can, there are anomalies. There are things that even the biologists and the physicists cannot fully explain. We tend to think of the ocean floor as a quiet place, a graveyard of silence. But in the summer of 1997, Hydrophones placed thousands of kilometers apart in the South Pacific picked up a sound. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't a submarine. It wasn't an earthquake or a shifting tectonic plate. It was a low-frequency sound, powerful, organic, and incredibly loud. It was louder than the call of a blue whale, louder than anything biology should be able to produce. It came from the deep, it rose up through the water column, and it was heard across an entire ocean basin. Scientists called it the bloop. And if you think the giant squid is terrifying, wait until you hear what might be swimming in the waters that are too deep for us to map. Click here to find out what made the loudest sound in history.